Prince Harry's sudden move has sent shockwaves through Montecito, and this time, it isn't palace protocol or royal pressure forcing change, it's exposure. Just minutes ago, reports confirmed that Harry has effectively distanced himself from Montecito following explosive revelations involving Piers Morgan and resurfaced yacht photographs tied to Meghan. What makes this moment so unsettling is not the photos themselves, but the timing. According to insiders, the images were not new, but the context surrounding them was. When Piers Morgan publicly revisited the photos, connecting them to claims Meghan has long denied, the reaction inside Harry's private world was immediate and deeply emotional. This was not a calculated public response, it was personal. Sources suggest Harry felt blindsided, not by the past, but by how forcefully it was dragged into the present. Montecito, once portrayed as a safe haven away from royal scrutiny, suddenly felt exposed. Familiar walls no longer offered protection. Privacy, the very thing Harry fought for, appeared to collapse overnight. Those close to him describe a man emotionally exhausted, caught between loyalty and disillusionment. Leaving Montecito was not about running away, it was about creating distance from a narrative spiraling beyond his control. What hurts most, insiders say, is not public judgment, it is realization, the growing sense that no matter how far he travels, controversy follows, and when it does, it no longer spares the person standing beside him. This moment marks more than a physical departure, it signals a fracture, quiet, unresolved, and deeply personal. And once that kind of distance begins, it rarely closes easily. The decision for Prince Harry to step away from Montecito did not come after a single headline or moment. It was the result of emotional pressure building quietly over time, finally reaching a point where distance felt like the only form of control left. Those close to him described the days leading up to his departure as heavy, tense, and filled with long silences rather than arguments. When Piers Morgan publicly revisited old yacht photographs connected to Meghan, the issue was not the images themselves, but the renewed attention they sparked. Harry has long been sensitive to how narratives are revived, reshaped, and weaponized. This moment felt familiar, a reminder of how quickly the past can be pulled into the present, regardless of context or explanation. Insiders suggest Harry felt caught off guard by how aggressively the discussion resurfaced. He has repeatedly spoken about the emotional toll of public scrutiny, and this development appeared to reopen wounds he believed had begun to heal. Montecito, once seen as a refuge, suddenly felt exposed, rather than protective. The emotional impact was immediate. According to those aware of the situation, Harry became noticeably withdrawn. Conversations reportedly grew shorter. Time alone increased. This was not anger directed outward, but frustration turned inward, the kind that arises when a person feels powerless to stop a cycle repeating itself. Leaving Montecito was not announced, and it was not framed as a permanent move. It was described instead as space, emotional, mental, and physical. For Harry, stepping away appeared less about Meghan and more about himself, a need to breathe without headlines following every step. Those familiar with the couple emphasize that this moment should not be mistaken for abandonment in a literal sense. Relationships under public pressure often experience periods of distance, especially when one partner feels overwhelmed. What makes this situation different is the scale of visibility and the emotional history Harry carries. Harry's reaction is deeply tied to his past experiences with the media. From a young age, he learned that stories rarely stay confined to facts. They grow, shift, and take on lives of their own. Each resurgence reinforces a sense of inevitability, that no matter how far he goes, the cycle continues. Friends have described him as emotionally exhausted rather than reactive. There was no dramatic confrontation, no public statement, no visible retaliation. Instead, there was quiet withdrawal, often a sign of someone processing disappointment rather than anger. The renewed attention also raised difficult questions for Harry internally, not about loyalty but about sustainability. How long can a life built on escape truly remain free from the forces it fled, and at what point does distance become a form of self-preservation rather than avoidance? Meghan, according to those close to the situation, has remained outwardly composed. Public silence has been interpreted in many ways, but insiders suggest it reflects strategy rather than indifference. She is said to be acutely aware of how any reaction could escalate the situation further. What complicates matters is that the controversy touches on identity, how Meghan is portrayed, and how Harry feels when that portrayal resurfaces. For him, this is not about defending or disputing images. It is about watching a narrative resurface that he cannot control, no matter how fiercely he wishes to. The Montecito move, temporary or not, symbolizes something larger. It represents the strain of living in a constant state of response. Even silence becomes interpreted. Even absence becomes a message. Harry's choice to step away may have been the only way to remove himself from immediate noise. Emotionally, this moment has forced Harry to confront an uncomfortable truth. Escaping an institution does not always mean escaping its shadow. The monarchy may be behind him, but the spotlight remains, unpredictable and unforgiving. Those close to him say this period has been reflective. Long walks, limited communication, time spent away from cameras and commentary. These are not signs of collapse, but of recalibration. Of a man reassessing where peace truly exists. Whether this distance leads to resolution or further separation remains unknown. What is clear is that Harry is navigating familiar pain in a new setting. The scenery has changed, the emotional challenge has not. This moment does not define an ending, but it does mark a pause, one filled with questions, exhaustion, and quiet uncertainty. And sometimes the most revealing moments are the ones that happen away from view. The emotional distance that followed Harry's decision to step away from Montecito did not arrive with confrontation. It arrived quietly, in the way routines loosen and conversations become shorter. Those familiar with the situation describe a household that shifted from tension to stillness, a stillness that can be more unsettling than open conflict. For Harry and Meghan, this moment feels different from previous controversies because it touches something unresolved. Past criticism was often met with strategy, statements, or silence chosen deliberately. This time, the resurfacing of images and commentary did not feel like a challenge to manage, but a reminder of how fragile control truly is. Harry's emotional response has been shaped by fatigue rather than outrage. Friends suggest he has reached a point where repetition itself has become painful. Each revived narrative reinforces a sense that the past is never allowed to remain where it belongs. That realization can erode even the strongest resolve. Meghan's position in this moment is more complex. Public silence has been interpreted externally as confidence or calculation, but privately it is said to be a form of self-protection. She understands how easily reaction can escalate scrutiny. Remaining still may feel safer than responding in a way that invites further dissection. This difference in emotional processing has reportedly created distance. Not disagreement, but disconnect. Harry retreats inward when overwhelmed, while Meghan is accustomed to navigating pressure through structure and planning. Neither response is wrong, but the contrast becomes more visible during moments of strain. The exposure has also reopened a fundamental question between them. How much of their lives can ever truly be private? Montecito was meant to symbolize control, a space chosen deliberately to redefine boundaries. Watching that space become a focal point of renewed controversy has been deeply unsettling. Those close to Harry suggest he is grappling with disappointment rather than doubt. Disappointment that the escape he believed in has not delivered peace. Disappointment that even silence is interpreted as strategy rather than exhaustion. This emotional weight has pushed him toward distance as a coping mechanism. Meghan, meanwhile, is said to remain focused on stability. She is aware that public narratives shift quickly and that emotional reactions can have long-term consequences. Her restraint may appear detached, but it is rooted in experience, an understanding that visibility can amplify vulnerability. What makes this moment feel heavier is its cumulative effect. One controversy alone does not fracture trust, but repeated exposure can strain patience. Harry's reaction reflects not a single trigger, but years of unresolved tension with media intrusion. The couple's dynamic has always existed under unusual pressure. Decisions that would normally remain private become public interpretation. Emotional pauses are framed as statements. In this environment, space becomes both necessary and dangerous. Necessary for healing, dangerous for speculation. Insiders emphasize that this distance should not be mistaken for collapse. Relationships evolve under stress, especially when both partners are navigating pressure differently. However, this moment has forced an emotional reckoning that cannot be ignored. Harry's need for distance appears driven by self-preservation. He has spoken openly about the toll of constant exposure, and this episode seems to have reaffirmed his limits. Stepping away may be his way of preventing resentment from taking root. For Meghan, the challenge lies in remaining composed while feeling scrutinized. Silence does not erase pressure, it simply relocates it inward. Maintaining stability requires emotional discipline that often goes unseen. This episode has also highlighted how differently each partner relates to the past. Harry experiences its return as intrusion, while Meghan experiences it as reinterpretation. That difference shapes how each responds when narratives resurface. Despite the tension, there are no reports of public conflict, legal action, or dramatic escalation. The absence of such responses suggests intention rather than impulse. Both appear aware that visible reaction would deepen the situation rather than resolve it. What remains uncertain is how long this emotional pause will last. Distance can offer clarity, but it can also magnify questions. For Harry, time away may bring perspective. For Meghan, it may reinforce the importance of control and composure. This moment represents a crossroads not defined by scandal, but by exhaustion. The issue is not what was exposed, but what the exposure represents, the inescapable nature of scrutiny and the emotional cost of living within it. Whether this period leads to renewed alignment or further separation remains to be seen. What is clear is that this controversy has cut deeper than others before it, not because of content, but because of repetition. Sometimes, the most difficult challenges are not the loudest ones. They are the ones that return again and again, quietly testing resilience. And for Harry and Meghan, this moment has become one of those tests, subtle, personal, and unresolved. As the story continued to unfold publicly, the reaction outside Montecito began to shape the emotional reality inside it. Media coverage intensified, not because of new information, but because of interpretation. Commentators debated meaning rather than fact, intention rather than truth. In situations like this, perception becomes more powerful than evidence, and that has proven deeply unsettling for those involved. Harry is said to be particularly sensitive to this stage of controversy. He understands how narratives evolve once they escape context. What begins as commentary quickly hardens into assumption, and assumption into identity. For someone who has spent much of his life being defined by stories told about him, this cycle is painfully familiar. Public reaction has not been uniform. Supporters view the renewed attention as intrusive and unfair, while critics see it as unavoidable consequence. This division creates a distorted mirror. No single reflection feels accurate, yet each one carries emotional weight. Navigating that environment requires resilience, and resilience has limits. The comparison to Harry's past has been unavoidable. Observers have drawn parallels between this moment and earlier periods of intense scrutiny, particularly those involving his mother. While circumstances differ, the emotional pattern, exposure followed by retreat, has triggered old instincts. Stepping back is not avoidance for him, it is survival. Royal history adds another layer to this moment. The monarchy has long operated on controlled distance, a strategy Harry once resisted but now appears to understand more deeply. The irony is difficult to ignore. The very boundaries he sought to escape are the ones he now finds himself needing. Meghan's experience of public reaction has been different. She is accustomed to polarized response and has learned to compartmentalize. What affects her most, according to those close to the situation, is not criticism but permanence, the knowledge that certain narratives never fully disappear. They resurface, evolve, and attach themselves to new moments regardless of relevance. This awareness has shaped her restraint. Public silence is not passivity. It is strategy shaped by experience. Yet even strategic silence carries emotional cost. Remaining composed under constant observation requires suppressing reaction, and suppression eventually seeks release. The media's role in amplifying speculation has also complicated the couple's internal dynamic. Stories framed as insight often lack proximity to reality. Still, repetition gives them influence. Harry's withdrawal has been interpreted as statement when it may simply be exhaustion. What makes this period particularly heavy is its lack of resolution. There has been no definitive event to respond to, no clear accusation to address. The absence of closure prolongs tension. Without an endpoint, emotional recovery becomes harder to define. Royal observers note that this is where pressure often reshapes identity. Prolonged scrutiny forces adaptation, either through detachment or reinforcement of boundaries. Harry appears to be choosing distance as a way to regain control over his emotional space. The legacy of royal life lingers in this choice. Despite stepping away, the framework of public expectation remains. The difference now is that Harry is navigating it without institutional buffer. Every reaction feels more personal, every headline closer. Meghan, meanwhile, is balancing visibility with preservation. Her focus appears fixed on maintaining forward momentum, even when past narratives intrude. This approach contrasts with Harry's inward turn, creating a temporary imbalance in how each processes the same pressure. Importantly, there has been no indication of irreversible rupture. Those close to the situation emphasize that distance does not always signal division. Sometimes it is a pause, a necessary recalibration when emotional overload becomes too great. Still, the strain is undeniable. External noise has a way of infiltrating private space, especially when left unanswered. The longer speculation continues, the more difficult it becomes to separate reality from projection. This moment has underscored a truth that follows many public figures. Escape from scrutiny is not achieved through geography alone. Distance can quiet sound, but it cannot silence memory, either public or personal. As the story continues to circulate, its impact is less about what is said and more about what is felt. For Harry, the weight of repetition has triggered withdrawal. For Meghan, the persistence of narrative has reinforced caution. Neither response is dramatic, neither is confrontational, but both reveal the emotional toll of living where privacy is conditional. And as public attention moves forward, the quiet decisions being made behind closed doors may ultimately matter more than any headline ever could. As the intensity of public attention slowly begins to shift elsewhere, what remains for Harry and Meghan is not relief, but reckoning. Moments like this do not end when headlines fade. They settle quietly into private thought, reshaping priorities in ways that are rarely visible from the outside. For Harry, this period appears to have clarified something he has long struggled to articulate: the difference between distance and peace. Leaving Montecito, even temporarily, may have offered physical separation, but it has also forced him to confront an emotional truth. Escape alone cannot resolve unresolved strain. Wherever he goes, the weight of scrutiny follows, carried not by place but by memory. Those close to him describe a man reflecting deeply, not only on recent exposure, but on years of accumulated pressure. Each incident, viewed alone, might seem manageable. Together they form a pattern that has steadily worn down his emotional resilience. This realization has not produced anger, but a sobering awareness of limits. Meghan's position in this aftermath is shaped by endurance. She has learned to move forward even when narratives circle backward. Her focus remains on stability, emotional, familial, and structural. That focus does not erase hurt, but it channels it. Silence, in this context, becomes an act of self-preservation rather than avoidance. What complicates this moment is not disagreement, but difference. Harry seeks quiet as relief. Meghan seeks control as protection. Both responses emerge from experience, yet they do not always align. Navigating that difference requires patience, something difficult to sustain under public observation. Insiders emphasize that there is no sense of finality. This is not an ending, but an inflection point, a moment where choices feel heavier because they carry accumulated meaning. The decisions being considered now are less reactive and more foundational. One of the most profound shifts appears to be Harry's relationship with exposure itself. Where he once believed transparency could diffuse speculation, he now seems to recognize its limitations. Some stories persist regardless of response. Understanding that reality marks a significant emotional evolution. Meghan, meanwhile, continues to balance public presence with personal boundaries. Her experience has taught her that visibility invites interpretation, but withdrawal invites speculation. There is no perfect position, only calculated trade-offs. This awareness has shaped her measured approach during this period. The emotional space between them is not described as hostile but contemplative. Distance, when chosen intentionally, can offer clarity. It can also magnify unresolved questions. The outcome depends not on time alone, but on how that time is used. Observers note that this moment may quietly redefine how they move forward, not in grand gestures, but in subtle recalibration. Fewer reactions, firmer boundaries, a renewed understanding of what privacy can realistically mean in a life shaped by public interest. What is striking is the absence of escalation. No public rebuttals, no dramatic statements. This restraint suggests learning rather than retreat. After years of navigating reaction, both appear more focused on preservation. The legacy of royal life still shadows these decisions. Harry's upbringing taught him the cost of emotional exposure, even as it denied him agency over it. Reconciling those contradictions remains an ongoing process, one not resolved by titles relinquished or borders crossed. For Meghan, resilience has become second nature, yet resilience does not negate vulnerability. Carrying public perception while protecting private reality requires constant adjustment. This moment has reinforced the importance of choosing which battles to engage and which to outgrow. As attention gradually drifts, the true impact of this episode will be measured not by headlines, but by internal shifts. How much space is needed, what boundaries are non-negotiable, and how to move forward without carrying the full weight of repetition. There is no clear resolution yet, and perhaps that is the point. Some moments are meant to clarify rather than conclude. They ask questions instead of answering them. For Harry and Meghan, this period stands as one of quiet significance, not because of what was revealed, but because of what it forced them to confront, about control, endurance, and the cost of being endlessly seen. And sometimes, the most meaningful changes do not arrive with announcements. They arrive in silence, shaped slowly by reflection, and carried forward long after the noise fades. That is where this story truly rests. Not in what the world believes it knows, but in what remains carefully, deliberately unseen.